Whenever you create text in HTML, whether that's in a bubble, in a text box on a book page, or the short description or long description in the properties, it's ultimately stored in HTML because that's the format it's ultimately going to be displayed in. Now, one of the things I like about SAP Enable Now is that it lets you see and optionally change this HTML that it's storing the content in. Now, I know not everyone knows HTML, so in this video we're going to look at the HTML tags that SAP Enable Now uses, how it does what it does, and we'll also learn why it does some of the things it does that you wouldn't really expect it to. So it's useful information to have. I'm going to start looking at a simple bubble in a simulation. This has text that's already been created for us through the recording dictionary when we recorded the simulation. And if I go into edit that, I can see that I have a source button down here on the bottom left. Clicking on that will show me the HTML source code behind this text. So let's look at exactly what this is doing. So HTML tags control the format of all of the text and all of the content that's within that file. The file here being strictly just that bubble. Now, the HTML tags are always contained in these chevrons, in these angled brackets. Anytime you see those, that's an HTML tag. They also typically work in pairs. You have an open tag, then you have the text, and then you have the close tag, and the formatting is applied to everything within those tags. So looking at what we have here, we actually have 3 paragraphs from our bubble. We have our first line of text, click enter with the icon there. Then we actually have a blank line, and then we have our next one, which says that we can also press enter on the keyboard. That appears in the HTML like this. The P and the \P at the end, they're the HTML tags that are delineating this particular paragraph. P is for paragraph. You have the P at the start and then the /P that says that's where it ends on the end. And you can see here's where we have our 3 paragraphs. This first paragraph here, then we have a blank paragraph, and then the last paragraph. Now, this code you might see quite often in here, this ampersand NBSP colon. This is a non-breaking space. And usually that's put in there just to force alignment or something like that. If we didn't have that in here and we just had an open paragraph and then closed paragraph tags, that would basically be deleted by SAP when it tidies up the code, because it says you've got a paragraph here with nothing in it. There's no point in having the paragraph. So the ampersand NBSP semicolon will force it to have a space in there, and that's what gives us that blank line. This is all done automatically. You don't need to worry too much about that. Now let's look at what else is going on in here. As I'm showing all of these things, I have the same code over here on the left-hand side of the screen. This is not part of SAP Enable Now. I've just pasted the code into Notepad++ because it does a nice job of formatting things out so we can see what ties up with what. What I will point out here is that there are a couple of things here which are placeholders. This is specific to SAP Enable Now. This is not HTML code. What this is doing is saying insert a placeholder of the object name. And this one is saying put the object image there. Those things are taken from the object name property, enter, and the object image here. There's also other ones that you can have, like down here we have the key desk. This is the hotkey name. So this is where it's pulling in that enter there that you can see right here. So that's what those are. Anytime you see dollar and then something, and then you've got an identify inside curly brackets, that is an SAP Enable Now placeholder. Finally in here, we have these span tags. This span tag here, this is the open tag here, and this is the close here. And this is saying format everything within these 2 span tags a specific way. And in this case, it's saying apply a style of bold to the font. That's all this is doing. It's just saying put this text, which is all of this stuff in here. This is what's between the open span and the close span tags. It's saying put that information in bold. That's why we have the enter button in bold here. It's actually also included the image in there which it doesn't need to because you can't put bold on an image. It only applies to text, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. We have exactly the same thing here for the enter key on the keyboard. That is right here. That's where it's pulling in the enter key. And it's also got a span thing here that says, okay, everything within this span statement, that should be in bold. So anytime you see any inline formatting within a line, it's always done using span statements. So that's all that we have in here in our bubble. Fairly simple, just a couple of paragraphs and maybe some inline formatting in there. So let's close that. And now let's go on to a slightly more interesting example. We're going to look at book pages and the text that's within them. Here I've got a sample book page and it's just got 5 lines of text in this. I can edit it exactly the same way. I go into it, and then if I go to the source, you can see that all it's doing is putting a number of paragraphs in here. That's all we've got. 5 paragraphs for these 5 lines of text. Nothing complicated in there. Okay, so let's look at starting to change this and we'll see what happens to it. I can make all of this into, for example, a numbered list by just clicking this button here. This you know already, and that gives me my numbered list. Now let's look at what the code behind that looks like. Now this again is standard HTML. This is how it puts text into a list. The OL tag here means it's an ordered list, ordered i.e. numbered. And as always, we've got our open tag and then we've got our close tag at the end. And everything within it is all of the lines within my list. So each of these is a line item. The LI effectively stands for line item. So that's what we have in here now. Okay, the other type of list that we can have is a bulleted list. So if I change this now, go back to look at our code, you can see that this is structured exactly the same way, but now we have a UL tag for unordered list, i.e. a bulleted list. And that's it. So this again is nothing particularly complicated. So far so good. Now let's say we start to add our own formatting to this. So I'm going to remove that from here. So I'm down to just my lines of text. Now, typically for a book page, you're going to have various text styles set up so that everything's formatted correctly for you. That's what I've got in this case. I'm going to apply my style called level 1 para to this. Okay, I'm going to apply that style and this is now going to format it according to my text styles. Okay, now this is actually a form of list that I've put in here. That's why you can see that the style has the 1, 2, 3 alongside it, but I don't actually have numbers or bullets on it because I don't care. I just want to format this. The reason why I do it as a list is because it makes indenting stuff super easy, assuming that my text styles are set up correctly. And we'll go and look at that in a second. Now, say these 3 in the middle here, I actually want to be an indented list. I can achieve that quite easily here. Just go and click my indent button and that will indent that text for me. Now, interestingly here, not specific to the HTML side of things, but while we're here, you can see that this is still formatted as a level 1 para, as opposed to my level 2 bullet, which is really what it is. We'll look at why that's happening in a minute. That's exactly as it should work, by the way. But let's look at what that's doing in our code for us. Now things are starting to look slightly more complicated. What we've got in here is we have our ordered list as before, because again, remember I said that this is effectively an ordered list style, and it has a class statement of level 1 para. This is saying go and use this particular text style, and we'll see that definition in a second. Then I've got my first line of this here. In fact, if I go back to the design, you'll see how this works. I've got my first list item here, my first line of text. Then here's my indented list. Okay, so I now have another ordered list within my first ordered list. This has a different class definition. This is using the level 2 bullet, and then this has 3 list items in it. And then I finish this list here with my /ol, which is the end of it right here. And then I have my last line of text, which is still within my first ordered list. I can see that because of the indentation I have here. And then I close that down. So that's how that's working. Before we go any further, let me save this and let me show you where those definitions are coming from. Level_1_para and level_2_bullet. They are our text styles. And if I go and look at those in here, this is the one it's pulling from. It's in bold. It's the default. If I go into that and look at list styles, remember I said that I was using list styles, I will see in here that I have my level 1 para. This is the exact style that you can see this is using here. This is saying use this particular style here, which is to put stuff in 24 pixels high and put it in this gray. And this one here, my level 2 bullet, that is using this style here, which is why you see I've got the font color is different. It's about the same size. It's using a bullet for that. Now, the reason why I like to use bulleted lists for this stuff, as opposed to just regular paragraphs, even for the first level that doesn't have any bullets or numbers on it, is because I can set the indentation to happen automatically in here. I can say in my level 1 para, if I indent stuff to level 2, I want you to use this style, my level 2 bullet, which is exactly this one. If I indent it again, I want to use the level 3 list style, which is level 3 bullet, which is I've got here. So this is where you get these things defined or happening automatically as you indent your text. And I do have a separate video on that, on how to set up text styles to facilitate this. Okay, so having seen that, let's now go back to our sample book page. So a couple of things I want to point out here though, and this is where it gets into what it's doing and why it's doing it the way it is, because you might not necessarily expect it to work the way it does, or you just think it's working incorrectly. It's actually working correctly and logically, but unless you know what that logic is, it just doesn't seem to make sense. So let's say I take my third line of text here, and I want this to be a level 3 indent. So I can indent this here, and it will go into the third level of indent. And if I go and look at the code for that, you can see that I do indeed have 3 levels of indentation. And I have my level 1 para, my level 2 bullet, and then my level 3 bullet, just like we saw in the text styles definition. So far, so good. But let's look at what happens here. If I decide that I really want this at the first level of text, I can move it back 1 level of indent, so now it's at the second level. I can move it back again to put it at the first level. That's easy enough to do, okay? And if I go and look at the source of that, just to confirm what it's done, you can see that I now have my first line of text at my first level. Then I have a second line of text. In fact, let me show you the design here. I have the second line of text here. Then this indented list ends. Then this third line of text is still a part of this level 1 para list. Then I have another indented list here for my 4th line of text, and then I drop back to the first level for the 5th line of text again. This is the code that matches exactly this. The problem with this, and what catches some people out, is if I now want to change this to go back to being a second level of indent, because I happen to do it too much and I got it wrong and I want to fix it again, if I now indent that again, you can see here that my spacing is messed up. Why is that? There's actually a logical reason for it. If I go and look at my source again, what it's actually given me is I've got my first level here, then I've got an ordered list for my second and third lines of text, and then I've got another ordered list that happens to be at the same level for my 4th line of text. Why did it do this? Because if you remember, when we moved stuff out, this third line of text, we moved it to the first level, it had to close out this ordered list. And then we had our existing second level of list here as a separate list. And when I basically moved stuff back in, it added it to the preceding list, but it already had this closing list here and the opening list here as well for the 4th line of text. So that's why I still have this here, and that's why my design looks like this. It looks like it's messed up the spacing. It didn't. It did what it thought you wanted to do. There's a couple of ways that we could fix this. One, I could come into the code and just delete this closing OL and that opening OL, and it would basically combine these 2 lists. But really the easiest way is just to come into the design view again and just delete that effectively end of list item and then press enter again to put it back. And that will fix it for us if we now go and look at the source. So now you can see we're exactly back to where we should be, which is just 2 bulleted lists, our level 1 and then our level 2 with these 3 lines in it. So that's one thing to watch out for. Next thing to watch out for is if I now want stuff out of this numbered list or out of this formatting at all, and I want to just provide some other text at the bottom, if I press enter here and enter some more text here, it's still using that same formatting. And if I decide that I don't want that formatting applied to this, I just want it to be normal, and I select this one paragraph and go to normal, it removes the formatting from everything. Again, super frustrating when it does this, but it's working logically. The reason is, if I undo that and look at what's happened here, when I added this line here of more text, if I go and look at the source code, what it did was it put that text within my ordered list because I just pressed enter basically at the end of the 5th line of text here, and it said, okay, you're in an ordered list at the moment, you must want this to be a list item. And then when I take this text here and I say, just remove the list formatting from this, it knows that you're in this ordered list and it says, oh, okay, so you don't want this on this entire list here, and that's why it removes it. So again, it's kind of working logically if you understand what it's doing. Now, to fix this particular case, it's actually a lot easier than you think. All you have to do is, with this paragraph, this list item selected, just click the outdent button, and this will take it out of the list entirely. So I click outdent, and now I'm back to having normal text. And we go and look at the source one more time, and you can see that what it's done is what we now wanted, which is to have this paragraph, this more text outside of the ordered list. So again, just something to watch out for when you're editing your text, because it does kind of seem that it just removes formatting when you don't really want it to, just because of where you're removing the formatting from. If you're removing it from within a bulleted list, it assumes you want to remove it from the entire bulleted list. So that's how that works. Okay, let's look at another couple of things. Let's look at applying some character level styles to our text here. I'll do a couple of things. Firstly, this second line of text here, say I want this to actually be in red. I can come into here and I can change the text style to red. And say this bit here, I want to apply a character style that I've got defined. I want to use the text style for this. So let me select that. Okay, so now let's go and look at our source code. So what do we have in here now? Firstly, where we took our second line of text, let me go to the design here so you can see this. The second line of text where we put the second word in red, if we go and look at that, you can see that as it did with the bubble that we were looking at earlier, it's putting a span statement in here. And here it's saying span style is color, and that's the hexadecimal code for red. So that's what it's doing here, is span and then style equals color, because it's applying direct styling to this. Now the third line of text, where I applied my text style to that, here it's also using a span statement, but it's using a class property on that. It's again, this is very similar to the class that we have on our ordered list, where it's saying, okay, go and use this predefined text style. So I have a text style set up called text, and that is what it's applying to everything within this open span and close span here, which is just the word third. So it's applying that text style of text to the word third, and that's exactly what I see here. So this is just something else to be aware of when you're looking at the HTML code, that anytime you see a span statement, it's formatting text within a line. It's basically inline formatting. If it uses a style property on that, it's direct formatting. And if it's using a class property on that, it's referring to a style. Okay, so that's some simple text formatting using paragraphs and inline formatting for that. Let's now look at something different. Let's look at a table and how that is reflected in the HTML code. I'm going to delete all of my text here and I'm going to insert a table instead. I'm just going to make it a nice simple table of 2 columns, 2 rows, and I'm going to say that the first row is a header row. We'll see what difference that makes. Now, quick tip for you, even if you want to insert a table just to force alignment of certain things, you're probably better inserting a table style of border as opposed to borderless, and then populate it and then change it to being a borderless one, because otherwise it's very difficult to see exactly where you're supposed to be entering the text. So let's insert this and put some text in it. Very, very simple table. So let's go and see what that source code looks like. So what we have here is a blank paragraph at the start of it, which is inserted by default. There's a couple of blank paragraphs at the end that we'll figure out how to delete those in a minute. And then I have my table in here. First off, notice that I have a new tag in here called div. This is for a division. And basically it's delineating a block of information. Now, there is actually nothing in this div. It's not got any properties on it or anything else that it's doing, but it's still put it in there just in case. And we'll look at why it's still there later. Here, it's absolutely not necessary, but in some cases it can be. So that's why it's been put in there effectively as a placeholder. Now, the key thing here is the table. This, again, we've got an open table tag, and then we've got a closed table tag. That's the one with the backslash here. And this is got a class statement on it again. So this is pulling from our text styles. If you go and look at your text styles, you'll find one called border table. This is a default one that's in there already, and that defines what color the border is, how much space there should be in the cells, that kind of stuff. Now, within the table, remember I said that I wanted the first row to be the header. That's why I have this T head for table head and closed table head here. And then I've got T body and closed T body for all of the body rows in the table. So let's go back and look at table head here. Every row in the table is delineated by TR tags. So I've got TR here for table row, and I've got the open and then the close. And within the row, each cell within that is also delineated by tags. In the header, it uses TH for table header, and I've got an open there and a close here for each cell within this, so within each column within the row. And then for the body, I've got a similar thing. I've got a table row, but this has TD for table data, whereas I've got TH for table header within the heading. In the body, I've got TD for table data, but it works exactly the same way. This delineates the start of the cell, and this delineates the end of the cell. And then within that, I just have a paragraph, as we've seen before, with the value of the cell contents in here, which is A, B, and 1 and 2 in here. So that's basically what a table looks like. Okay, so let's look at some more things. First, let's look at this stuff here on how we get rid of these trailing paragraphs. They were just left there from before we put the table in. I've left them in there deliberately because I want to show you what happens when we try to remove those. So I'll leave this code here and we'll go and edit our design tab here. So I'll click the cursor as close to the bottom as I can. And then I'm just going to use the backspace key. So the first backspace key is going to remove that line 19 for us. The second one is going to remove that paragraph here for me. Now I'm positioned within this cell, or so it looks in my design view here. If I want to remove that too because I want to type another value in there or something, and I press backspace again, it's deleted my whole table. Why has it done that? The reason it's done that is because when I went to try and delete my content, let me just undo that. When I went to delete my content, the first thing it did was it deleted this section here. Okay? Then I went and deleted this one. Now, although I looked like I was just behind the 2 here, actually I was right here with this div statement here. And SAP Enable Now says, oh, okay, you want to delete the div, do you? Okay, let me take out the closing div all the way up to the opening div. And that's what it does, because that's what you told it to delete. So although the cursor looks like you're in the cell here, you're not. You're actually outside of the table, but there's no way to click outside of the table. And it thinks you're just going to delete that whole thing. It thinks that's what you want to do. So again, SAP Enable Now is working logically. It's just not the way you expect it to work. So do watch out for that. If you do need to delete just this 2, make sure you click in the cell, tab to the right place, and then delete it. Or sorry, cursor to the right place and then delete it. So that's how to delete stuff there. Now, the next thing is, say I want to put an additional paragraph below this table. At the moment, I don't really have any way of getting to that. Okay, if I type some text in, it's going to appear in the cell. If I press enter, I'm still within the cell. This is where it's not great, and the only way to really fix this is to basically go into the source code, and after that div, just enter whatever your text to be, and then go back to the design view. Don't worry about having no tags in here to say this is a paragraph, because as we'll see, what will happen, we go to the design view, we've now got that outside of the table, which is exactly where we want it. And if I go back to the source view again, I can see that as expected, it has put paragraph tags around this, because it always wants to tidy up the HTML and make it valid HTML. Okay, so that's tables. One last thing I'll point out, remember we've got this div statement in here that's not really doing anything at the moment. So let's go and make a couple of quick changes to this. I'm going to go into my table definition. I'm going to update it and say I want it to be in the center of the whole page. So I'll add that to it here. And then one last thing I'll do is I'll take this 1 here and I will apply red to that. Okay, so now let's go and look at our code for that. So now what we can see is that our div statement that previously didn't have anything on it, it's now got a thing saying align equals center. This is saying apply alignment to the whole of this division, i.e. everything within it, which happens to be just our table, and says I want you to align it to the center of the page. So now we have stuff on our div statement. So that's why there was one there, even though it was empty. It was basically in case it needed to add something to it later. And the other thing that we've got in here is down here under my table data for my second row, my first column in that, I've got a paragraph in here, and I've now got a span statement in here as well. Again, it always wants to use span statements where it can. This actually illustrates a very useful thing here, in that you can see that if it wants to apply formatting to a part of a paragraph, i.e. inline formatting, it's going to use a span statement. If it wants to apply formatting to multiple paragraphs or a block of information, it's going to use a div statement in here. Okay, so div for division for a block of text, span for just text within a single block. That's how that works. Okay, one last thing in here. Remember, it always wants to use span statements. Now, if you know HTML, you know that you can change stuff to be in formatting by using the B tag for bold. And I'm going to change this last word in here of paragraph to be in bold. And those tags will work. They're valid HTML. And if I go back to my design, you'll see that it has put that in bold. I can see it's in bold here. But if I go and look at the source again now, I can see that it's changed it to use a span anyway. It always wants to use spans. Even though the B was valid HTML, it decides that it's going to do things this way instead. So all the time, it's always going to use divs and spans to control stuff. And that is more or less the last of what we wanted to see in here. Just some basic stuff about how HTML is used within SAP Enable Now and the type of things it supports. Most of the time, you'll probably not need to ever look at the source code in here, but it's useful to know how it works, especially when it does stuff like deletes a whole table when you don't think it should, or it removes all of the formatting from your entire list. There is a reason for it, as we've just seen. It's working logically. And once you understand that, you should be in a much better position to work with Enable Now, even if you're only ever in the Design tab. Hope you found that useful. Please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.